Here's a chilling experience I had when I was working at Stub. I worked there for almost 2 years, several years ago. This happened toward the end of my time there. One evening, I was closing. We closed at 8 p.m. every night, and I usually stayed a few extra minutes to finish up the closing task. During the last few hours, it was just me and one coworker. It had been pretty quiet all day, but around 6 p.m., it was completely dead. We had barely any customers, and during the entire 7 o'clock hour, not a single one. It wasn't a super busy neighborhood, but mornings were usually active. Afternoons and evenings, a few people would come in to work on their laptops. Not that night, though, which honestly didn't bother me. We were able to start cleaning up early, and it was clear we probably wouldn't have any more customers for the rest of the evening. Around 7:45 p.m., I told my coworker she could head home and that I'd finish everything. I knew she was a student and had a lot of homework, so she left and I was alone. Around 7:59 p.m., I went into the back room to finish the usual closing duties. I spent maybe 2 or 3 minutes back there, then started heading out through the large swinging door with the small window that separates the back room from behind the counter. As I was about to push through, I saw something through the window that made me freeze. It looked like someone was standing behind the counter. That didn't make sense. I hadn't heard anyone come in, and it definitely wasn't my coworker. It was a man fairly tall, or at least much taller than me. At first, I thought he was wearing a hat, but when he turned slightly, I realized it wasn't a hat. It was a full face mask. A balaclava. He was standing near the register. That's when it hit me. This guy was probably trying to rob the store. I quickly backed away from the door and retreated deeper into the back room. I felt stupid for not locking up earlier. He had walked in while I was in the back and hadn't even noticed me. Then, I suddenly heard footsteps approaching the back room door. The storage area wasn't tiny, but it wasn't huge either. It was mostly filled with boxes of all sizes, supplies, ingredients, and stacks of cups. The first thing that came to mind was to find a large box in the back corner. Being the small woman that I am, I'm barely 4'11". I slipped inside one as quietly as I could. I fit perfectly. Then I grabbed another large empty box from the shelf next to me and pulled it over me as extra cover. The man didn't come into the back room right away. I expected the door to swing open while I was climbing into the box, but it didn't. I don't know what he was doing out there, but he stayed on the other side of the door for a short while. Thankfully, I still had my phone in my pocket. I took it out and called the police. About 30 seconds after I made the call, I heard the back room door open. I immediately hung up. I didn't want him to hear anything, even though I had been whispering. All I had managed to tell the operator was the Starbucks address and that I thought we were being robbed. She had just started asking me a question when I ended the call. I hoped they'd still send someone. The man walked into the back room. He stepped in, then paused. I could hear him moving closer. He was mumbling something under his breath. I couldn't understand what he was saying. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought he might hear it. I prayed he wouldn't find me. I was well hidden, but it was still absolutely terrifying. He got within about 10 feet of me, then turned around. A moment later, I heard the door behind the counter open and closed. After that, Everything went quiet. I stayed hidden. I dared not move. I texted friends and family while sitting inside that box. I stayed there for about 30 minutes. Then I started hearing noises again. Soon after, I realized it was the police. The guy had left before they arrived. I told them everything and we checked the register. He kept the mask on the entire time, so there was no way to identify his face. He took all the cash from the register and left. After speaking with the police, I was finally able to go home. Later, I found out the man who robbed the store was arrested. I refused to work closing shifts for a while. After that, I stayed maybe another month or two before quitting. Sometimes I wonder if he had been watching the store from outside and saw me go into the back. I really don't know, but I'm just glad I wasn't out front when he came in. I don't want to know what might have happened. She survived the box, but the next predator is hiding in plain sight. If you're enjoying the shadows so far, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It's the only way to make sure you don't miss what's coming next. The story I'm about to tell is 100% true. I just want to share it as a warning. I was 19 years old when this happened. My parents were living in Ohio at the time, and I was flying home to stay with them for a while. Money was tight, so I booked the cheapest flight I could find, which meant a very late departure. A lot of flights were delayed that night. I was staring out at the rain-soaked runway when someone spoke behind me. Got a lighter? I turned around and saw a round, older man standing next to me. He had a scruffy beard and a sharp, pointed nose that looked like it could poke your eye out from a mile away. When I just stared at him confused, he snapped his fingers in front of my face and repeated the question, "Hey, you got a lighter?" No, sorry, I don't smoke. What's wrong with the world these days? When I was your age, I used to smoke 2 packs a day, he said. What a waste of your lungs. Shouldn't you be discouraging young people from smoking? You're the adult here. Well, he shrugged. I'm the cool one, hard to find these days. While he talked, I couldn't help but look him over from head to toe. He was wearing an expensive suit. A gold watch gleamed on his left wrist every time he moved his hand, but his teeth were in terrible shape, which confirmed he probably wasn't lying about the smoking. He asked where I was headed and a few basic questions. I didn't share much. I'm naturally reserved. Even after he realized I wasn't interested in talking, he just stood there staring at me. I ignored him and went back to my seat. There was still a long time before boarding, and I didn't want to fall asleep. I figured coffee would help me stay awake, so I grabbed my backpack and headed to the Starbucks at the end of the terminal. There was one employee behind the counter. I ordered a cappuccino and 2 chocolate chip cookies. I was sitting alone in a corner, scrolling on my phone, when I heard that familiar voice again. "So, you drink coffee?" I looked up. It was him. Normally, I'm polite, but when someone really gets under my skin, I snap. The second he spoke, I felt a wave of anger. Without asking, he pulled out the chair right next to me and sat down. "I'll grab a coffee too. Don't worry, what you ordered is covered. We've got time before our flights. Why not hang out? I enjoy the company of young minds." I was stunned by his audacity. He kept talking even though I wasn't responding. Finally, I'd had enough. "Listen, old man, I can pay for my own coffee. Why don't you mind your own business and leave me alone? Go do whatever people your age do. Sit quietly somewhere." He stared at me. "So that's how your parents raised you?" "No," I shot back. "They taught me not to tolerate people who don't respect boundaries, so back off. That's no way to treat someone trying to be friendly. Dude, go away." When I raised my voice, he stood up, but he didn't leave Starbucks. Instead, he walked to the counter, ordered his own coffee, and sat at the table directly across from mine. I was beyond annoyed, but at that point, there wasn't much I could do. I calmed myself down and waited for my drink. He just sat there watching me. every movement. His expression was unsettling. There was anger in his eyes after I insulted him, but I didn't care. A few seconds later, my order arrived. I was about to take a sip when he started doing something deliberately disgusting. He smiled, showing those yellowed teeth, then grabbed a napkin. He unfolded it carefully and placed it on the table. Then, in an exaggerated, deliberate way, he began grooming himself in a way that was clearly meant to bother me, placing what he removed onto the napkin one by one. And after each one, he would look up and smile at me. He was enjoying making me uncomfortable. I refused to leave, though. I knew that's what he wanted. If I walked out, it would feel like he won. I can be stubborn when it comes to my pride, so I stayed seated while he continued his revolting little performance. Eventually, I stopped looking at him. After a while, I really needed to use the restroom, but I hadn't finished my coffee. The airport was nearly empty, and the Starbucks employee looked half asleep during her night shift. I didn't want to leave my table unattended. I was sure that man would mess with my stuff if I did. So, I asked the Starbucks employee if she could keep an eye on my table while I ran to the restroom. Then, I hurried off. When I came back, the man was still sitting there, calmly sipping his coffee. He turned his face away with an indifferent expression. I felt relieved. Maybe he was finally done bothering me. I sat down, picked up my cup, took a few more sips, then headed back toward the waiting area. I finished the last bite of my cookie and quickly drank the rest of my cappuccino. That's when I felt something strange on my tongue. It didn't taste like coffee. It felt stringy. I immediately spat it out into a napkin. What I saw made my stomach drop. Tiny, coarse strands. And in that moment, I understood exactly what they were. The realization hit me, and I instantly threw up right there on the Starbucks floor. The employee rushed over when she saw me getting sick. A small scene was forming. Security came over too. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that man smiling. When I had gone to the restroom, he had slipped what he'd collected into my coffee, taking advantage of the sleepy employee. I felt so sick, I couldn't even properly explain what had happened to security. They escorted me out of the airport and called paramedics. Physically, I was fine after about an hour. But for nearly a year after that, I couldn't drink any hot beverages. Every time I looked at a cup of coffee, I remembered how close I'd come to swallowing something I never agreed to. I never saw that man again, and wherever he is, I hope he gets help for whatever darkness made him act that way. My girlfriend and I used to love going to the Starbucks on the corner near our place. We had just moved in together after 4 years of dating. I was even thinking about proposing. She had just graduated from medical school, and I was building my own business. Our schedules were crazy, but grabbing breakfast together every morning was the best part of our day. One day, the Starbucks we went to every morning was suddenly closed. We showed up, and the whole place was shut down. Police tape covered the entrance. Officers were everywhere. I approached the nearest cop and asked what was going on. "Sorry, kid. Active crime scene. You can't go through." "A crime scene? Oh my God. We come here all the time. What happened?" "I can't say. Please step back." The officer looked disturbed, like he'd seen something awful. "Okay, let's go." And we left. We went out for a walk and ended up at a different Starbucks, away from our usual spot, closer to the train station. We sat down and she pulled out her phone. "Hey, look at this." Apparently, they found a girl dead in the cafe. She had been missing for 2 weeks. They found her body propped upright behind the counter, held up by a metal rod, dressed like a barista. Oh my God, that's horrible. Apparently, she was the 3rd girl in 6 months, all found in different Starbucks locations across the state. There was a hint of excitement in Stacy's voice. One strange thing about her, she's a huge true crime fan. She follows real cases and is fascinated by serial killers. I was seriously uncomfortable with the whole conversation. One of the baristas called our names, so I went to grab our drinks. On my way back to the table, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. A man in his 50s, scruffy beard, dirty clothes, was standing outside the cafe, staring through the window at Stacy. When he noticed me looking at him, he quickly walked away. Later, Stacy and I went our separate ways. She had a shift at the hospital, and I had to head to the office. When I got home that night, she wasn't there. I waited. Late into the night, no sign of her. I called the police, but they said they can't officially treat someone as missing until 24 hours have passed. Luckily, I had location sharing set up on our phones. I checked. Her signal was about 20 miles outside the city. I grabbed my knife, jumped on my motorcycle, and sped toward the location on the map. When I got there, it was a cabin in the middle of nowhere. I cut the engine and approached quietly. "Shut up," I heard in the distance, and what sounded like a woman's muffled voice. It had to be Stacy. I crept up to the cabin door and positioned myself beside it. "No," I said, "shut up." It was her. I kicked the door in, knife in hand. "Get away from her." He turned toward me. He wasn't armed, but he was bigger than me, stronger. He charged. I dodged and managed to trip him. He hit the floor hard. Before he could get up, I ran to Stacy and cut the tape binding her to the chair. "Oh my God, Jack, hurry, let's go." The guy was already getting up, now blocking the only exit. There was an oil lamp near the corner of the room. He lunged for it, but as I sidestepped him, I slashed upward and caught his face. I hurt him badly as he stumbled back, clutching his face. Stacy and I bolted for the door. We were almost free. She paused for a second, grabbed the oil lamp, and smashed it onto the floor. The wooden cabin started catching fire. We had to run. We made it into the woods when we heard the man screaming behind us. "Patricia, they're getting away." Suddenly, the forest lit up. Headlights from a truck aimed straight at us. A woman's voice screamed, "Oh, come back here, little pigs." Gunshots rang out from the truck. One bullet nearly hit me, but we were running so fast, they lost us in the trees. I tried to find my motorcycle. More shots echoed through the woods, bullets striking trees around us. The woman, Patricia, was hunting us. Thankfully, she had a flashlight, which made it easier to track where she was in the darkness. She was far enough away. We reached my bike. I started it and took off at full speed, leaving the burning cabin behind. We didn't stop until we reached the police station. The next day, the police called us in. It turns out the man who kidnapped your girlfriend, the police said, was the Starbucks killer. Him and his wife. His name was Henry Adams. Hers was Patricia Adams. They searched another property registered under his name and found photos of him with all the missing girls. You saved your girlfriend's life. Later, I told Stacy everything. Apparently, when police found Henry at the cabin, he had lost a lot of blood, but Patricia was still on the run. "Don't worry, they'll catch her." "Thank God," Stacy whispered. "Can we stay at a hotel somewhere else?" she asked. We were unarmed, and those two clearly knew where we lived. So I agreed. We left that afternoon. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. When we arrived at the hotel and got our keys, we finally felt safe. Until we woke up in the middle of the night. Something had crashed onto the floor. "You thought you escaped, huh?" The woman was standing there. She looked younger than in her photo. She was wearing a green apron, like the baristas at Starbucks. "What do you want?" I shouted. Stacy was beside me, gripping my arm, terrified. I wanted her off the bed. "That's right, sweetheart. Go stand over there." Stacy didn't move. Patricia rushed at her, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her. I jumped out of bed to grab my knife from the drawer. Patricia screamed, "You burned my house," and then she shot me in the leg. I collapsed to the floor. I couldn't move. That's when Stacy drove her elbow straight into Patricia's face. I honestly didn't expect that from her. While Patricia clutched her bleeding nose, Stacy leapt over the bed and crouched beside me. She grabbed the knife from the drawer and handed it to me. By the time Patricia recovered, we were already running. We sprinted down the hallway and made it to the front desk where we called the police. They arrived quickly. That night, we ended up at the station. The police told us Henry and Patricia had been stalking Stacy for weeks. They knew everything, where we lived, where we worked. Everything. They had arrested Henry at the cabin when officers arrived, but Patricia had escaped. They still hadn't found her. Even after everything that happened, I still wish we could go out for coffee in the mornings. Stacy, who is now my wife, and I used to love that, but we are more afraid of the outside world than we've ever been. You never know what's waiting out there. For now, we have breakfast at home.